Picture an engine so lopsided, so visually wrong, that the first time engineers wheeled it out in front of company brass, somebody in the room genuinely thought it had been installed crooked, 30 degrees off vertical, just tipped over on its side like it fell asleep in the engine bay. And this thing, this awkward, leaning slab of cast iron that looked like a mistake, went on to outlive every single engine Chrysler ever built to replace it. Cab drivers ran it past 1,000,000 miles. The military used it. It powered boats, forklifts, generators, irrigation pumps, and Chrysler kept building it in one form or another for over 40 years. 40 years off a design nobody thought would make it past the first model year. This is the story of the Slant-Six, the ugliest engine Detroit ever built, and the one that simply refused to quit. Let's go back to 1960, because you have to understand what was happening in Detroit that year to understand why this thing exists at all. All three of the big three rolled out compact cars for 1960. Everybody was scared of the imports, scared of the Volkswagen creeping into driveways, and everybody needed a small, cheap, economical car to fight back with. Chevrolet had the Corvair, Ford had the Falcon, and Chrysler had the Valiant, which wasn't even badged as a Plymouth at first. It launched as its own brand. And under the hood, Chrysler wasn't messing around with some warmed-over flathead from the 50s. They built an entirely new six-cylinder engine from scratch, and by their own account, they looked at everything before landing on the final layout. Inline fours, V6, flat engines, even radial aircraft designs got considered and tossed out. What they landed on was a straight six, tilted 30 degrees to the right. Now, why tilt it? This is the part everybody gets wrong when they call it a gimmick. It wasn't styling, it was packaging. Compact cars in 1960 wanted low hood lines, and a tall, straight six standing bolt upright doesn't fit under a low hood without punching a hole through it. Lay that same engine over 30 degrees and suddenly you've dropped the height dramatically without shrinking a single cubic inch of displacement. And laying it over opened up a second advantage nobody talks about enough. It gave engineers room to cluster the spark plugs, the distributor, and the coil all on one accessible side of the block, and it let the intake manifold breathe with long, straight, unobstructed runners instead of getting choked around other hardware. Chrysler's own marketing at the time called it a completely new engine, a basic layout that had never been used in a passenger car before. For once, that wasn't just copyright or puffery, it was true. Two versions launched together in 1960, and this is where it gets a little technical, but stick with me because it matters later. The smaller one displaced 170 cubic inches, and it used what Chrysler internally called the LG block, low G, meaning a shorter block casting and a shorter crank stroke. That one went into the Valiant. The bigger one displaced 225 cubic inches on what they called the RG block, raised G, a taller casting with a longer stroke, and that one went into the full-size Plymouths and the Dodge Dart. Two completely different displacements sharing one philosophy. Rated output out of the gate was modest, somewhere around 101 to 117 horsepower for the 170, depending which year's brochure you believe, and around 145 for the 225. Nobody was scaring anybody at a stoplight, but horsepower was never the point. Chrysler even tried something bold early on. Between late 1961 and early 1963, they produced somewhere around 50,000 engines using a die-cast aluminum block instead of iron, chasing weight savings in the Valiant and the new Dodge Lancer. And it was clever in theory. Lighter nose, better balance, better economy. But the execution had a problem baked right into it. The cylinders used iron liners cast directly into the aluminum block, and those two metals expand and contract at wildly different rates as the engine heats and cools. Over time, the iron liners started separating from the aluminum around them, a failure mode called delamination, and it made the aluminum engines noticeably more trouble-prone than the plain iron versions sitting right next to them on the same assembly line. Chrysler pulled the plug on the aluminum block by 1963. Lesson learned the expensive way. And here's the thing, nobody remembers the aluminum Slant-Six today. What people remember is the iron one, because the iron one is the version that refused to quit. And it needed to prove that fast, because right out of the gate, this new economy engine went and did something nobody expected. In the compact race run just ahead of the 1960 Daytona 500, Valiants powered by this brand new Slant-Six swept the top 7 finishing positions, 7 in a straight line on their very first real test against the competition. An engine designed for grocery-getting duty in a compact car had just made a statement in front of every stock car fan in the country, and it hadn't even had time to build a reputation yet. So why did it end up lasting so long? Because underneath the awkward angle, Chrysler had actually over-engineered the bones of the thing. The block used a deep skirt design, meaning the casting extends well below the crankshaft's center line instead of stopping right at it, which gives the whole bottom and serious rigidity under load. 4 main bearings held that crankshaft steady, keeping the engine short and stiff at the same time. None of that shows up on a spec sheet that impresses anybody at a car show, but it's exactly the kind of decision that determines whether an engine is still turning over on its 400,000th mile or sitting in a scrapyard by its 80,000th, and the stories back it up in a way that almost nothing else in Detroit history can match. Owners talk about running these past 100,000 miles with nothing more than driveway maintenance, no drama, no surprises. Cab companies specifically loved them because taxi duty is the single most brutal test an engine can face, and Slant-Sixes would run past 1,000,000 miles under that kind of abuse. There's a documented 63 Valiant that sat parked, untouched from 1996 all the way into recent years at over 450,000 miles on the clock. When a crew finally went back to revive it, the carburetor's accelerator pump had literally turned to hard plastic from sitting, and they had to rig a gravity-fed fuel bottle just to get gas into it. After a few minutes of cranking and a cloud of rust and dust smoke, it lit off. And as it came up to temperature, the stuck piston rings actually reseated themselves, and compression came back into a usable range. 450,000 miles, more than a decade sitting dead in a barn, and it woke back up like nothing happened. Try that with almost anything else built in that era. Now, here's where the refused to die part of this story really kicks in, because Chrysler tried more than once to move on from this engine, and it just wouldn't let go. The 170 got phased out in 1969, replaced in 1970 by a 198 cubic inch version sharing the taller RG block architecture. Fine, that's a normal evolutionary step, but the flagship 225 just kept rolling. It survived the entire 1970s. It survived the fuel crisis. It survived emissions regulations that killed off far more sophisticated engines around it. Chrysler finally pulled it from U.S. passenger cars after the 1983 model year. You'd think that's the end. It is not. The same basic G engine architecture kept going in Chrysler trucks all the way through 1987. Then it kept going in marine, agricultural, and industrial applications through 1991. And Chrysler's Mexican operations in Toluca kept building replacement units off this same basic design as late as the year 2000. Read that again. An engine engineered for a 1960 compact car outlived the Ford Pinto, outlived the Malaise era, outlived disco, outlived the entire First Gulf War, and was still coming off an assembly line the same year everybody was panicking about Y2K. And overseas, Chrysler's Australian operation actually tried to formally retire it with something better. They developed the Hemi-6, a genuinely more modern, more powerful straight six meant to be the Slant-Six's true successor down under. And that engine was good. Nobody's arguing it wasn't. But even with an actual factory-blessed replacement sitting right there on paper, the plain old Slant-Six kept finding its way into applications long after it was supposed to have been retired. Because when something that unglamorous just keeps working, fleet buyers and industrial customers do not care how modern the alternative looks. Think about what that really means. This is an engine that looks wrong sitting in the bay, tilted over like it's leaning against something for support. No performance pedigree to speak of, no glossy magazine cover moment, nothing that made anybody's pulse race in 1960. And yet it quietly outworked, outlasted, and outlived nearly everything Detroit threw at it over the next 4 decades because Chrysler accidentally built something almost impossible to kill while they were just trying to fit a cheap 6-cylinder under a low hood. Nobody sat down in 1959 and said, let's build the engine that cab drivers will run past 1,000,000 miles, that will still be waking up out of barns 30 years later, that Mexico will still be casting new copies of into the new millennium. They just built it solid because that's what the job called for, and it turned out solid doesn't go out of style. Let me know down in the comments, did your family ever have a Slant-Six under the hood? A Valiant, a Dart, a Duster, one of those old Dodge trucks? I want to hear about it. Otherwise, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps me out, and I will see you all in the next one, enthusiasts.